Okay, thank you for waiting. We now have a quorum, so we can get started. The Solid Waste Management Authority of the City of Crescent City and the County of Del Norte, State of California is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. So we'll call this meeting to order, and we're gonna move item 7.1 to the very top of the list because Ted is going to take over. We need a resolution designating Ted Ward as the clerk of the board since Rose is on leave now. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Okay, seeing no. Okay, Mr. Miles.
Mr. Henderson, I want to make you aware. If it wasn't for Jay Serino the other day, I would have probably turned in my resignation to that. I'm not a happy camper.
This is not public comment. Do you know that? We're talking about
But
Ted.
you said public comment,
So
so
I'm
should I
on
shut
hold.
down?
Yes, I'm holding public comment for a minute because we're taking up another item right now.
I'll sit down, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you very much. This is public comment on Ted Ward being designated as as our clerk of the board because
Item
Of this board.
7.1.
Solid Waste Board.
Your group right here?
yes.
Okay.
Never mind. Anybody else want to make a round?
Can I object?
No,
Ted can't.
you can't. Okay, seeing no other public comment, bring it back to the board. Comments? We have a motion and a second.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we did look into alternatives, and it was spendy, and the person couldn't be here all the time, so this ended up being the best.
And thank Ted for offering,
Stepping up.
yeah, thanks.
Ted, would you poll the vote, please?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes,
Commissioner Shalong?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamara?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Okay, so now we are going to move on to public comment. Mr. Miles.
Well, I'll start the recording again. If you want to blame what I'm going to say, you can blame it on Jay Serino. I'm not a happy camper, and I'll tell you why. For over a year and a half, I went before the Board of Supervisors and kept asking that the Solid Waste Task Force be reconstituted. I want to point out some facts from you. In a week's time, it will be October. In reality, we haven't done a damn thing. And I tell you why I believe we haven't done a damn thing. It's called corporation. It takes two groups to play in the same sandbox, if you remember your kindergarten days. I'm witnessing two things that just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I witnessed something at our last meeting. Kevin asked for a document. What he asked for was a metrics prepared by Mary Wilson and somebody who in reality is not even a member of the task force. Mrs. Dickey. A copy of that document was not copied, and it could have been copied and given to Kevin. At the same time, there's been questions of minutes and who is responsible for taking the minutes at either our formal meetings or at our fact-finding minutes. I believe that keeping minutes for prosperity, that's not the word, but for the future is important. I'd like to make a simple suggestion. That either staff stays, a good example was Kevin was at a meeting, he had to leave, something was voted on, and in reality, there's no minutes of that vote.
Richard, could you move up to your suggestion, please? And
Well, you can buy a little recorder for under $50. The library uses one,
Okay,
and I think a recorder should be purchased for the task force.
thank you.
Well, you're going to hear more, Jerry, when we get to 7.2 and 7.3.
Not if you don't show quiet.
Any more public comment? Okay, seeing no more public comment, then we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve items 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public comment on the consent agenda?
Who was the second on that?
David? Seeing no public comment, then bring it back to the board. Any questions, comments? Ted, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Finnegan?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamer?
Yes.
Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Shalom?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Okay, now we're going to have a report from the Solid Waste Task Force.
Let's see here. Let's see, good afternoon. Wanted to start maybe with something a little bit lighter today, and what the Solid Waste Task Force has put together is its own website. And we're looking forward to, I bought some copies of what we have going here. Again, we're in the process of fine tuning, but basically we have all of our members, our calendar, and it's going to be a really nice place for us to have our files on, because there's so much paper with this. We would be able to refer, and also we have links to our California Resource Code, County Code, City Code, Cal Recycle, as well as the authority. And we'll be able to go in, make notes. The members of the task force will have the ability to change what's on here, but the general public will not. So that's something that I thought we'd start off with. If I was going to pass the copy out to this, it just kind of gives you the site address. And again, we're just starting on this, so it will be fine-tuned as we go along.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has been on it, but it's pretty cool, really.
Did you get to see it?
Yeah, it was very easy to navigate through, and it looks pretty cool.
It's just a lot of paperwork. And let's see, the second thing that I wanted to move forward with today is the solid waste
task force recommendations, and I hope that everybody got a copy. This is my last one, so I'm going to go over our recommendations from the task force regarding the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority ordinances 200801, 02, and 03. And although you've received a report from Kevin Hendricks dated September 19th, that's part of your package today, it is unofficial as it has not been presented to the task force, and we did not ask him to write that report. And even though parts of his version are accurate, the actual recommendations from the task force are in this report. So our recommendation is that the city and county incorporate into their own ordinances provisions that address its theft of service, inadequate service, and lack of service. And furthermore, we recommend that the ordinance 2008-02, the nuisance abatement ordinance, be repealed in its entirety. And let's see, so our summary was on July 24th of this year. The Board of Commissioners directed the local task force as an independent body to review all three of the ordinances, to recommend on amending, repealing, replace, or to let those stand. And in accordance with those directions, the task force discussed the issues, including the problems with repetition, burdensomeness, lack of transparency, lack of access by the general public, etc. The task force created a subcommittee to review and compare state, city, county, and solid waste laws and ordinances to identify the duplication as well as any differences. And the subcommittee started a matrix of the code sections to facilitate their comparison. And after consulting the city and county enforcement officers, the subcommittee realized that a complete matrix would be unnecessary because the solid waste ordinances 20802 and 20803 were copied from the county ordinances. Furthermore, the existing city and county ordinances adequately cover the majority of solid waste issues, except as we identified theft of service, lack of service, and inadequate service. And it is probable that the city and county ordinances would need minor changes to incorporate this recommendation and make them consistent with one another. Let's see here. From the inception of these ordinance 20801, the responsibility ordinance, the nuisance abatement ordinance, and the administrative citation, there's been public confusion and contention regarding duplication of regulation, inconsistencies between the city, county, and solid waste ordinances, and understanding of what constitutes compliance with the Del Norte solid waste requirements. The stated purpose of these ordinances is to reduce the illegal dumping and nuisance accumulation of solid waste. The task force found that there has been a decrease in illegal dumping, abandonment of vehicles, and nuisance accumulation of solid waste. A careful review of the statistics revealed that this decline started in 2005 when the county hired a new code enforcement officer. And as you can see from the chart, the majority of the enforcement effort in Del Norte uses the county or city ordinances and state law. And I have included in here, sorry Martha, I'm reading yours, this chart. And what this is it's the total of the city and county code enforcement officers' activities. In the green, when you go down, that is the county nuisance cases. So that's the green. And then the red here shows the solid waste violations. So it's just to kind of give you an idea proportionally of the cases.
Mary, can I ask you a quick question? The city hasn't had a code enforcement officer per se for the last several years.
So I got the number,
So I was just curious, when you say our code enforcement activity, what
I
would
called
that
up Eric Taylor, and he gave me the numbers from May of 2010 through the current year for his code enforcement activity.
And when you say activity, I mean, are these representing calls or dollars or
Cases.
cases? Okay, so, I mean, we send out 50 letters to property owners saying that their, grass needs to be mowed. So is that considered a case?
He has 44 that he had given us, said that were cases from May of 2010 until to date.
Okay. I'm going to guess that most of those are just basic letters out to property owners saying that they need to, and there are some others, that we've actually put, a hotel into receivership and things like that, but.
Yeah, most of them he said don't move forward at all. The general letter takes care of things. So
Yeah.
then those would not be in here. Is what, and I have a recommendation from him here later that's also attached, and I was hoping he'd be here today to answer some direct
Okay.
questions.
All right, thanks.
So do you have one of these for me? I do, but I didn't have enough. I didn't realize that Ted needed one too,
memorized.
sorry. Oh, okay.
She can have mine.
I was, only had to have 10 made, like it cost $20.
I apologize for being late. My shoulder, my icing went relatively well, and I fell asleep, so I apologize.
So that refers to this chart right here then. And again, where was I at? Citations, and as you can see from the chart, the majority of enforcement in Del Norte uses the county or city ordinances and state laws. And the amount of effort used for the solid waste ordinances is minuscule in comparison. And since the adoption, there have been a total of 31 citations issued for violations of the ordinance with 1 nuisance abatement. And if you see the attached chart, that's the next chart. It's the citations that were split out and basically went through all the citations and then categorized them according to what was cited and by year. So in 2009, 2010, 2011. And I went through the files, yes.
So you went through city and county files?
No, Solid Waste Authority.
Okay,
This one here is the Solid Waste Authority files.
okay.
And so then just made a grid in what is being cited. And what you'll see in the green is the majority of citations are for items 403 to .406. And those are the things that we've called out as theft of service, accumulation, and inadequate service. So those are the number. Over on the side, you'll see there has been 12 in 2009, in 2010. And then, so basically, our recommendation, everything in the red and the green here would be taken in under the existing city and county code. Let's see. In comparison, the city and county have abated, so there's been 1 nuisance abatement, and in comparison, the city and county have abated 20 public nuisance and or blighted properties in the same time frame with 1,379 cases. So 590 of these cases included illegal dumping and trash issues. And the county has a very nice computer program that they have an activity report that goes and breaks out for what the citations were given out for. And that, as compared in fiscal year 2011-12, only $1,736 of the solid waste funds were expended on enforcement efforts. So even though $20,000 a year are allocated for enforcement. According to the city and county staff, the public would be better served if this $20,000 were set aside to help pay for disposal fees of nuisance abatement conducted by city and county enforcement officers. The task force found that some of the confusion experienced by the general public is because they do not know whether the city or county or solid waste ordinances apply in their situation. And the task force also believes that due to the size and the demographics of the city and the unincorporated county, the public would be best served if the requirements of the city and county code were the same and then mirror each other to the extent practicable. And let's see, the task force did not meet with attorneys yet, but we would like to meet with attorneys to provide any information in considering which elements that this would be most useful to integrate into the city and county codes. And in conclusion, we found that nuisance abatement efforts by the city and the county are adequate. It's 20 to 1 in that time period. And by unanimous vote, we recommended that the Solid Waste Management Authority does not need to be in the nuisance abatement business, and that 2000-0802 be repealed in its entirety. Let's see, city staff members are in accord with this conclusion. And after Exhibit C, if you look at,
Harry, when you say city staff, are you just talking about Eric Taylor?
I met with both the city manager and the Eric Taylor at a meeting.
Okay, so our city manager was in agreement that solid waste does not need to do any further nuisance abatement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have that on Exhibit C. This was, again, this came directly through, yeah, it is, it's Exhibit C.
Just as a point of order,
Oh.
I guess, and Jerry, you're in charge here. Unfortunately, it was not agendized as an action item, so it's simply a report to be given by the task force. And then I would ask, once you receive that report, that it be agendized for an action item to take action on the recommendations brought forward by Mary and the task force.
Well, the item is on the agenda to discuss and take possible action on the recommendation of the Solid Waste Task Force, item number 7.2.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to understand it because we were just given the report 5
Yeah.
minutes before the meeting started.
Sorry, I came by everybody's offices during lunch, but nobody was there, and I didn't know if you'd go back to the city or not. So basically, again, there's a duplication in the nuisance ordinance.
Exhibit C?
Exhibit C. Let's see,
So where is the statement from the city,
this is the opinion of the city code enforcement
the
officer.
city manager? Where's the signature of the city manager that he has identified and signed on this?
I only have this down here. I'll just be clear. I had a meeting with both the city manager and also with the code enforcement officer. We went over several issues that the code enforcement officer has with the ordinances and what's going on.
I get that.
So then he put forward, the city manager wanted to see what the code enforcement officer was putting forward, and that's what's in this Exhibit C.
So where is the city manager saying that he agrees that we should get rid of this ordinance?
I'm in here, again, I'm saying it's coming from the opinion of the city code enforcement officer with relevant portions of the Del Norte solid waste ordinance are not covered by the city, could be adopted and enforced in the city. Further, instead of directly enforcing nuisance ordinance, the solid waste authority could make funds available to the county and city officials for abatement. Actually,
I'm sorry, I must be looking at the wrong page. I'm looking at meeting with city manager and code enforcement, number C.
right.
Again, will you read the quote for me?
It is the opinion of the city code enforcement officer that relevant portions of the solid waste ordinance that are not covered by the Crescent City Municipal Code could be adopted into the city and enforced by the city. So those portions, again, theft of service.
No, then it says furthermore.
Oh, furthermore, instead of directly enforcing nuisance ordinance, the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority could make funds available to the county and city officials for abatement.
And this is an AKA quote from Eric Taylor or from the city manager?
This is Eric Taylor.
Okay, thank you.
And So he emailed this over to me, but after our meeting.
I would think it would have to come before the council.
Yeah, you would think.
I've just texted our city manager. I thought he was going to be here, but the council would be the one that would make that decision to eliminate.
Yeah, I hope I
or
didn't misspeak at all. Again, it's the
Yeah.
opinion of this code enforcement. It's right.
It's typically not a staff decision to make this kind of statement.
Yeah, we spoke with both the county and the
It's just
city.
not a staff decision to make this kind of statement.
Oh, the city manager did know that he made this statement.
Mary, could you continue on with your
Okay.
report? Let's get this finished.
Let's see here. Okay, the task force found that portions of 2801 would be beneficial to enforcement efforts if they were incorporated within the city and the county codes. These portions addressed theft of service, inadequate service, and lack of service. There may be additional portions of 2801 that could be beneficial to the city and county if they were incorporated into their ordinances. However, the local task force has not had sufficient time to make a conclusive comparison of existing city and county codes to verify whether or not additional topics are adequately covered. Therefore, the task force respectfully recommends that the city and county incorporate in their own ordinances provisions that address theft of service, inadequate service, and lack of service. Again, those are the tools that are most being used out of this ordinance that the code enforcement officers felt would be beneficial for them to have in their tool belt in existing city and county codes. And the task force does not recommend repealing ordinance 2008-01 until such time as the above additions are in full force and effect. See, I don't know, that's a little bit out of order there, attachment B.
Mary, if I could, this is kind of dragging on, and I think we get your recommendation.
Okay.
Loud and clear, that the portions of there are portions of the ordinances that need to be taken on by the city and the county, and then the recommendation is to repeal this ordinance. And so that's clear enough. Is that clear enough to everybody that that's what the recommendation is? So let's move on to another topic.
Okay.
Mr. Hemmingson?
Yes.
May I just ask a question about one of the graphs? When we're dealing with the graph that has the county nuisance citation activity with the blue bars, the multiple blue bars, and we have down below the total city and county and the county nuisance citations and the Del Norte solid waste management, I'm not correct in assuming that the blue, the differences between the red and the green, the differences between the total blue and the red and the green is city activity, right? In other words,
No.
this almost makes it appear like the city's been much more active than the county, but really it's the other way around, isn't it?
Yes. The county and the city are added together in these blue bars.
Right, but the green
the
shows
green's so
county.
small.
Oh, the green is the county nuisance citations. I split out the nuisance, since the county already has an existing nuisance citation,
Oh, that's different, okay.
that's an ordinance. They've given out, this is the amount of nuisance citations they've given out over this period of time, because they have their own county nuisance ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And I had one question.
Sure.
Just, Kevin, in relationship to our budget, do we still give the county money for code enforcement?
We still have an arrangement with the county that if we have a need for code enforcement, Dave Mason provides that service for us, yes.
Right, but didn't we at some point contribute to the budget, like 15,000?
Well, that's a separate thing. We contribute $15,000 each to the city and the county for services,
Oh, yeah,
trash
okay.
services.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Isn't that in kind?
No,
No.
it's out of pocket. It's us paying the disposal expenses for the city and the county. And in some cases, it's paying for dumpsters for the city and the county.
The last thing I wanted to report on was that Thursday of this last week, the task force met with Cal Recycle, who does an annual visit to all of their areas, and Terry Brennan was the Cal Recycle Supervisor, and Spencer Fine is our field rep. And they went over the essential elements required by the state for the 5-year report, the due date of the report, and potential penalties for a delinquent report. And they started with a brief presentation of the 1989 law establishing the need for this integrated waste management plan and the 5 elements required by each local task force to report on. And again, it is mandated by the state that the task force report on these. He stated that the 2 most important items that we need to comment are, 1, to ensure that there is a plan for a 15-year capacity for disposal. And in our case, this would entail providing evidence of our contract with Dry Creek Landfill. And the second thing was to look at the 5 elements to see if they are needed to be revised or amended. Next, we went over when I asked about the due date, it was kind of surprising that our first due date was January 2005, and our next due date is January 2010. So, right now, as the January 2005 report was not turned in until January 2008, 3 years passed, we have asked for clarification regarding what years to entail in this report that is the 2010 report. So we did ask if we could skip this one and just go to the 2015 since we were this far into it, but no go. So we are waiting for the supervisor to call regarding the need to review 2005 and 6 again, and just for some clarification. And it was very comforting to be told that there's no penalty for being late. The only penalty that we would be subject to is, again, if we weren't hitting that 50% diversion rate. And it's kind of the apparent failure of the staff and the previous task force to get this done when it was due. Accordingly, it is the intention of this task force to complete this as soon as possible. We have scheduled it as our first item on our next agenda for October 4th. And at this point, because again, we realized that this needed to be done a while back ago, we will be meeting twice a month until this is completed. Again, if we were to get it in by January of this year, which I feel should be pretty easy, that will be exactly 5 years since the last one was turned in. So again, they were very nice to meet with, and they offered up some good resources, and it was a good meeting. And I know I've taken a lot of your time.
One
Great.
question.
Mary, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought I heard Mr. Miles say that Vicky Dickey's not on the task force. Is that accurate? Or, okay, then she's at all your meetings, but she doesn't vote. Is that how it works? Okay, I just wanted to get clarification. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I had a quick one. Is it required that they complete meeting minutes, or is it okay for them to not have them? Do we need to buy them a recorder?
You're asking me?
Yeah, or somebody.
Well, there were bylaws adopted by the local task force that says the administrative assistant would take minutes, and since Rose is not doing that anymore, Ted and/or I are taking minutes if we're invited to the meeting. This is the first I've heard that there's a meeting October 4th. Do you want us there?
You guys left before the meeting finished, so yes, we just are setting our regular meetings now. Will be the
Okay.
first
So when
and
we're
third
present,
Thursday of the
we will
month.
take the minutes. This is also the first I've heard officially that there was a vote to repeal the ordinance, because that was a meeting that was scheduled that I couldn't be at for the whole meeting. So we've been trying to take minutes, and then the minutes should go to Mary because she's putting out the agenda, and then those should go on the agenda for review before they're adopted.
And just one, I'm not sure if you're aware that Triplicates Candidates Forum is October 4th as well, so,
Yeah.
if there might be a conflict for people to attend both,
Busy time of the year for everybody.
yeah.
Oh,
So you might want to rethink
yeah.
that. Okay, thanks. Public comment. Mr. Miles.
I would like to make a clarification for the city members. When the code enforcement for the city brought this document to our meeting, the director of solid waste asked for a copy of that document. The next day, I went to the city hall because in some ways, I wanted to know if the city manager, because I didn't get to see this document, it wasn't shared with all of us, but I did notice it was on city letterhead. So I did get to talk to the city manager. He was aware that this document was reviewed by him and Eric Taylor. I asked our city manager, because I do live in the city, that a copy of Eric's suggestions be sent to Kevin, and I would hope Kevin did get a copy of that document from our city manager.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, thank you. So, moving on. We're going to move on to the director's report.
Let me move through this quickly. The first three items are the standard reports that you've been getting, which provides information on what we've spent and the revenue that's come in. I was hoping that I would have the June report so we could talk about year-end. That apparently will be available for the next meeting, so that they're still working on closing out the fiscal year for us. The county auditor, it's not available yet for June. And I was able yesterday to get the August report, which I passed out to you for the auditor report. I guess if I can point out some good news on the August report is it's showing a cash balance of $481,000, and this was after we made the $154,000 loan payment for August, so the cash flow is holding up. But I'm still curious, as I'm sure you are, to see how we ended the last fiscal year, so we'll bring that back to the next meeting.
When are those generally due? Aren't they due before our meeting?
Well, the year-end closeout takes more time than just the monthly report.
It takes a while.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the auditor's doing the best they can, and
Yeah, they can tell us.
well, well, if you'd like to hear from Sherrick, I'm sure he'd say the same thing, because I just talked to him before the meeting.
His microphone's not on, I don't think.
It'll probably be the next week or so before we're sure all the adjusting entries and such are complete, so that you can have a finalized product for your June closeouts. And it usually does take longer to complete that because there's all the adjustments that have to be done. They just had the special district audits also, so we're waiting for any of the adjusting entries that'll come from that audit. So, you're welcome.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Sherrick.
questions while he's up there? Okay, thanks.
3.6, Ted, you have a picture you want to put up there? This is real brief. We had the hazardous waste roundup September 15th, and, no, first slide. top. There you go. We had 138 cars come through on Saturday. For the people that came, it was a very quick and convenient service. This was a random picture in the middle of the day, and most of the times people came driving through, they were right into the hot zone, they got unloaded, and they were moved out. No complaints, lots of happy customers. We're happy to see the numbers, we're actually happy to see the numbers going down, and I think that may have something to do with the fact that people have cleared out their sheds. They're starting to buy fewer of these hazardous products. At least I hope so, because last year this event cost us $35,000, about $200 a car. So it's an important service that we provide, but every time I advertise it so people know, I really hope that we don't get that many cars, because it's expensive. So I just thought I'd show you a picture. And that's the director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions about any items number 3 through 3.1 through 3.6.
Questions from commissioners?
Move to approve items 3.1 through 3.6.
It's just information, we don't have to.
Yeah, these are just...
But I will take public comment, if anybody wants to comment on the director's report. See no public comment, then we're going to move on.
Right on.
I'm sorry?
This, I hate to take everyone's time on this, but the monthly split sheet, August 1 through 31st, looks like fund number 20286, and they're just pennies. What are those pennies adjusted?
This is item 3.2?
This is item,
Yes.
yes, I think so. It's this, it's just odd that we have 2 cents and 10 cents and 25 cents, and I'm wondering what the function of that 20286 fund is. In monthly split sheet, August 1 through 31, 2012. Do you see
Oh, you're
what I
looking
mean?
at the auditor,
I'm looking at the,
the handout you just got today?
No.
Grand totals,
Oh.
3.2, is that it?
Yeah.
There's a line, because any given day is going to be over and under, it's over under. So some days are a
it's
little...
over,
We don't, so some days the cash is a little over, some days it's a little under.
oh, I
And
see, it just,
So
okay.
cumulatively,
It's just an adjustment.
right.
Kind of. Okay, it just,
On the 9th, the gate person took $60 and went out to lunch.
okay. I would hope not.
No.
Thank you.
That's not what I'm saying, Kelly.
It was
Thanks
just
for
a column.
helping.
Thank you, the column looks so different than all the other columns. I
Yeah,
just
that's a
didn't
good
know what
question,
that
Rick.
was.
Anytime.
Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on to 4.1. Discussion possible action regarding,
Okay, you guys have been working so hard, I thought I should bring you some good news for a change. We applied for and got approval, attached is a letter, approval from Cal Recycle to reduce our post-closure maintenance liability by 1/6 for 5 years out of the 30-year period. And according to our external auditor, she's never seen this happen before. So we're going to tell her what we did. And Cal Recycle was very good to work with, but they had to get documents on the closure, the proper closure, the acceptance of the closure from the state agencies. So everything fell into place. This is not necessarily a cash savings, but if you look at the August report that I just gave you, for example, every month it shows you post-closure as a liability, which is being reported at $2.65 million. That's adjusted up every year, so Ted has made that calculation to give you a ballpark idea of how much this is reduced. So basically it's reducing our liability by about $455,000, which makes our bottom line, at least our reporting look better, our finances look stronger, and as time goes by, from this point forward, we can apply for an annual adjustment. So in 10 more years, will be about half of what you're looking at right now. So we will continue to do that, because that was the direction you gave us, and that will make our audit look better. Yeah, that's great news.
Mr. Chair, I have so it says we need to apply for this annually. Is there a month that you submit the request?
We would work with Cal Recycle on that, but the additional applications would be for additional years of credit.
Right.
Each year that goes by, we want to apply for an additional year of credit.
Right, so, but there's no
There's no set
specific-
schedule.
Okay.
In fact, the schedule that they chose was not the schedule we thought we were looking at when we started with, because they look at the start date as being the date that all the paperwork was lined up, not necessarily the date that we walked away from a closed landfill.
Okay.
And so, but because we've already gone through the process of getting all the documents in place, the process from this point forward should be fairly routine.
Great job, you guys.
Thank you. That was an important one.
Okay.
There's no action required on this, but I'd be happy to take any more questions or compliments for Ted. There you go.
Any public comment? Okay. And any other questions, comments? Moving on, 4.2.
More good news. It wasn't good news when I published the agenda, but I was going to report to you that we had been making progress. We have been really unhappy with the fact that we're being ranked as a 1A, and the reason that the waste discharge fee was assessed as a 1A was because of concern due to the proximity of residential wells to the landfill and the possibility or the potential that those wells could be contaminated. Of course, mainly we just didn't like that it was so much money, and we wanted to find a way, and the board's direction was to find a way to make that better and see if they could recognize us in a different category. We had considered that there might be a legal angle for us, so we consulted with our attorneys and we made a document request, which they responded to by lining up. They measured it in feet. They said it was about 25 feet worth of files, which they could copy for us and send, or we could go down and look at them. So Ted and I scheduled a time when we could go to Santa Rosa, and they literally did have them lined up in the front area that we could go through all these files. Since we were going anyway, we thought we would take a shot at meeting with the executive director, and so the day before we went, and they knew why we were coming because we were looking at these files, we met with the executive director and the assistant executive director and the lead engineer who's in charge of all the water quality, and plus our engineer. We had what I consider to be a very cooperative and positive meeting. They really did seem to understand how much of an impact this had on our budget because we're small and it's a lot of money. Luis Rivera I've known since I've been here. Luis Rivera has known me since the county was in deep doo-doo because of the landfill, and they know that this authority and staff have worked really hard to try to get in front of that. So Luis has been very good to work with, and he's always been a straight shooter. I think I could summarize their position because they knew we were contemplating some sort of legal action. He said very nicely and politely, but very clearly, this may not be fair, but it's legal. So we said, well, what else can we do? We talked about a couple options, which I reiterated in the letter back to them after Ted, in the 7-hour drive back, we started brainstorming on possible solutions. And so this letter went out September 11th. I hadn't heard back, so I emailed Luis today, and I got this response. Hello, Kevin. For ease of implementation, we prefer the second option in this letter. So that you may notify your board that we agree to reduce the rating of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority to a 2A for 1 year, with the stipulation to kick back to a 1A under the circumstances outlined in your letter. And basically, in the letter, what it says is, if you would allow us the money to do the investigation that you're wanting, which is to demonstrate that we're not impacting the adjacent wells, if you reduce our ranking from 1A to 2A, that frees up almost $30,000, which we said we would, and of course with your direction and approval, redirect into doing that investigation. And it's our best shot to demonstrate that we should not be a 1A, that by putting an additional well or two, taking some samples and continuing to monitor the groundwater flow, that we hope that we can demonstrate in this coming year that we should permanently stay as a 2A status, which then forevermore saves us about almost $30,000 a year. And then he says, we will memorialize this agreement via letter signed by Matt, that's the executive director. And with regards to revising approaches to overall monitoring network, we were pleased to engage in that discussion, because what I suggested is we've been monitoring some of these wells for so long, they're really not telling us much more new information. Some of the ones that are up gradient or not adjacent to the landfill, that if we can cut back on some of the sampling on some of those wells, that it would free up the lab, the testing money that we would need to pay for the new testing. So the indication on both of those points is very positive, that we've got a shot right now to basically redirect the savings from the reduced fee and to use that money to demonstrate that we should continue to be as a 2A. So we've got a 1-year window to be able to do that. I think it was a great compromise, and it's a reflection of their appreciation for our financial status and our sincere willingness to do the right thing. Thank you, Martha.
That is important.
Do you need a motion to move forward with that plan?
That would probably be good, because we haven't talked about this other than a general direction to fix it. And this is a solution that will involve redirecting some money in our budget to be able to do the plan.
So what is the plan?
The plan is that they will reduce our fee from...
No, I understand what their plan is. What's our plan?
What's our plan?
We have to dig some more wells?
We will install at least one monitoring well between the landfill and the household wells. We will collect some samples from that well and test it and see if there's, because we've showed you maps before, the way the data that we have shows that the water is not moving in the direction of those wells, but if we have another testing point and maybe a piezometer, which is basically a water depth, that we can better characterize how the water is moving between the landfill and those houses. And then by having a well where we can actually pull water samples and run it through the lab for testing, we'll be able to test to see if we're finding anything. So, of course, what we're hoping is we can demonstrate the water is not moving toward the houses and we're not finding chemicals of concern.
And if I recall in our previous conversations, we were concerned that testing the existing wells may not have a very positive outcome because there could be contaminants from those wells due to other debris and whatnot that are surrounding those wells. So the new well would be the best solution.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
And they understood that and agreed with that concern also.
I think it makes perfect sense. I think you should put the agreement together and let this board review it.
So I would like to ask a question here.
Yeah.
Jerry. So this is in regards to the money that we were charged, that we had to appeal. We had to pay it first and then appeal it.
Yeah, the waste discharge fees last
Yes.
year was $52,697.
Will we get any of that back?
No.
That we've already
I thought you pay it and then appeal it, and if they're willing to change it to a 2 from a 1, why wouldn't we be reimbursed?
I think did you say the year starts now, right?
This is from this point forward.
Well, that's convenient.
Well,
Well, we've already learned that the state doesn't have a proper appeals process.
Yeah.
well, let me say again that I appreciate the flexibility of the staff and the executive director and the people that we met with to consider this, because this is money, I mean, they're trying to balance their budget too. This is money out of their pocket.
Yeah, on our backs.
Everybody's backs. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just trying to do what they're doing. We approach this with appropriate respect for their situation, and they reciprocated by showing some appreciation for our situation. This is an unusual thing. I've never heard of it happening before, where they'll actually, on faith that we're right, reduce it to give us a chance to prove that we're right.
Okay. We'll play nice.
I don't think we'll get a better deal, I can say that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I move that we agree to the 2A ranking and redirect the difference in the fine to following up with the investigative monitoring and reporting with their board.
Second?
Do you need more specific than that, Kevin? or-
That's fine.
Okay. Motion and second. Public comment? Questions from board members? Comments?
I have another question then. If we're going to be testing the wells in the area, is that going to be a cost to us?
We're not testing the private wells. We are installing a well on the county property that is between the landfill and the private wells. And we'll position it in such a way that we'll be able to, and in cooperation with the water board, we'll establish the location of it in such a way that it will tell us the answers that we need to know. And I can't guarantee that it will be the answer we want.
Right.
Right, it's a double-edged sword. So we could be opening up a can of worms here, but
Well, the
I
worst
think-
case scenario would be we'd be a 1A, right? Like we
Well-
already are.
There's been a concern, and Jerry and I have had this conversation, and we should all care that we're not polluting the wells of our neighbors. And so we all agree on that. We all
which is-
care.
was my suggestion that we run city water out there. And I still think we should.
And I will suggest we take it
Yep.
one step at a time, and if we can demonstrate
Out there.
to their satisfaction that we're not impacting them, then everybody's happy.
We've had discussions. Yeah, they're working on it.
Can we call the question?
Ted, would you pull the vote, please?
Commissioner Sullivan? Yep. Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamer?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Shalong?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson.
Yes. Okay, moving
Great.
on to 4.3. Discussion, possible action requirement by the North Coast Air Quality Management District to conduct engineering investigation measuring the volume and composition of the gases being passively vented at the landfill.
I think this one's mine.
Yes, the Air District remembered that we're here. And sometimes it's good to be far away from everybody, but they eventually remember. Ted has a short presentation and a recommendation.
I got a call from Mr. Ziv Lang of the North Coast Air Quality Management District, and he emphasized that we needed to submit a investigation into the gas being emitted by the Crescent City landfill. And essentially this requires that we provide an estimate as to how much gas is being emitted and what is the landfill gas heat input capacity. This is calculated in two ways. One, as a spreadsheet calculation based on how much waste is in place and how long it's been there. And the other one is actually measuring the gas coming out of each of the vents at the landfill and then using that to project how much gas is being produced. The skills are required will require an engineer and equipment that the authority doesn't have. So the recommendation is that authority staff draft a scope of services to develop and release a request for proposals for the engineering services that are required. Staff will return to a board meeting after the proposals are received so the board may select the firm and approve the expenses to complete these tasks. The RFP will likely be released concurrently with the RFP for the 5-year review of the landfill post-closure plan and possibly even the investigation we just discussed. And this may allow for some cost savings if these projects can be performed by the same engineering firm.
Okay, so you just need direction? You're going to bring this back to the board, so directed. Okay, let's move on. 4.4.
Everybody good with that?
Oh, sure, we're going to have public comment. Richard, what do you need?
We're going to do this engineering on this. One of the gases that we generate from our closed dump is methane. My question, if we're going to pay for an engineering study, I'm aware throughout California, closed dumps collect methane if the vet volume is at a certain rate and burn that methane and to create small amounts of power that they sell to power companies. I'd like to make this suggestion.
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment?
I'm sorry for the gesticulation, but I think when we have the PowerPoint up, the cameras are not working. Because what you're seeing up there is what everybody else is seeing, and
What they see is, what are on those monitors are just for you guys to view, and then the cameras are showing.
okay, we're good. Thank you, Sylvia.
Are you done with your presentation?
There are more slides coming.
No, there's some more. I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry, did the board have a question about that?
About,
Richard?
oh, no.
Well, this
I mean,
actually-
we're going to do the engineering and the study. We'll find out what's there.
Yeah, we need to
can't
know
do
how
anything.
much and how much.
Exactly.
Then we'll know if there's enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. You have your direction. Any other comments?
Just one quick question. I know this is 2006. I don't know if we should have been doing it all along or not, but is there any mandated cost money coming our way to complete this? Is this something we're going to have to do out of our own budget?
We know you're new.
This,
I am new, but
Yeah,
I'm asking good questions.
these are good questions. I am not aware of any money that would pay for this study. Every other landfill in the state has to do this, and part of this is that greenhouse gas law that got passed. So they're looking at every landfill, and just because we're small, we're
Okay,
at the end of the list.
it's worth a shot.
And we tried to argue that we're so small that they should just leave us alone, but that only lasted until now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. 4.4, the 5-year review of the post-closure maintenance plan.
Ted's got this one also. It's kind of related.
This is actually, this is one of those 5-year reviews that comes along 5 years after closure has been completed. So this is something that's been required by CalRecycle and then is placed as a task for Brian McNally, our local enforcement agent for CalRecycle, and then he tells us we have to do it. So essentially it's part of his work plan, but it's something that we have to complete so that he can complete his work plan. This investigation, the post-closure update essentially has one new requirement that was not in the previous post-closure maintenance plan, and that is additional cost projections for non-water releases. And essentially, it requires that we include a cost estimate of what it would take to replace the entire landfill cap. So we have to take the engineering plan and costs that were used for completing the landfill closure and update all of those costs and include that as part of this report. Financially, it doesn't change much in terms of this agency because we meet these requirements through a pledge of revenue at the transfer station. So even though perhaps under this calculation our liability may appear to increase, it is still met by the same source of funds. But that doesn't change that this is a requirement, and so it's one more piece of engineering that is necessary because we do need to update those costs and those materials to complete this 5-year review. So staff recommendation is that, again, we draft a scope of services and develop and release a request for proposals for these engineering services.
So this is just another direction.
It's another one, and direction would be adequate.
Any public comment? So, any problems with that direction from board members? No. Staff is so directed.
Thank you.
4.5, it's got some vandalism going on. They're trying to burn up our vents before we can
Yeah.
even test what's coming out of them.
Yeah, well, they've proven that we have gas. Put up the next set of pictures. I'm sorry, I made you shut all this thing down. There's a couple things. The first pictures I'm going to show you is how we repair me and Ted, which is mainly Ted. That's Ted on a track loader.
So Kevin, we already saw these pictures. Is this another vent that's been vandalized? Yeah.
When did we see these?
I don't know, like 2 meetings ago maybe?
No, I don't think so. This is new. I'll be really brief though, Kelly, and if you've seen it before, I apologize. These are new pictures. So last winter we had erosion. When we have erosion, we have to repair it. The way that we repair it is we have a vendor bring in materials, rock, soil, etc., Ted rents a track loader and gets out on the landfill. Next slide. And one of the things that happens is the drainage ditches on the side of the landfill blow out, and so you can see Ted's moving dirt into place and repairing the drainage structures that go next along the side. Next. This is from the top. So you can see he's working down the side of the slope, repairing the drainage structure. Next. And next. I don't think you've seen this. That is what a gas vent looks like. It's passive venting. The gas comes out from under the plastic. It has to go someplace, and so it comes out these vents and goes into the air. That was acceptable when we closed the landfill. There's a lot of attention now on collecting and flaring and possibly utilizing for fuel. Next. And this is what happens when somebody lights one of them on fire. This vent, go to the next one, up close, you can see that it got so hot that the actual pipe melted over and cracked through. And go to the last one. And that's what it looks like inside. So this was burning for a while, long enough for it to get hot and melt, and that's what the inside of the pipe looks like. So we will be able to replace this pipe, but there's not many things more scary and expensive than a landfill fire. So whoever did this is clearly, and I hope they're listening, an idiot. Because if this lit the landfill on fire, then the paperwork that we're doing to estimate the cost of repairing the landfill would be a real thing. Because when landfills light on fire, they have their own fuel. They fuel themselves, and what you would see is smoke coming out of every gas vent, and the fire would be inside the landfill, melting the plastic cover that we spent $5 million to put on. So the sheriff was great. They showed up. He took pictures. The chance of catching anybody is slim. We want you to be aware that we're continuing to have vandalism at the landfill, and just 2 days ago we had one of the gates broken into and the locks cut off. So it's ongoing. Sheriff
Guido to sit out there overnight for a few minutes.
Guido.
What about cameras?
Who said that? Cameras. Well, currently don't have any power or internet. It'd be nice to have a streaming camera. It would be nice to have a camera that could be plugged in. The actual challenge, and I've considered wildlife cameras, because you can put those and they're fairly inexpensive, but there's so many different ways to get in. You have to put it at a point where you actually think someone's coming, and then you have to believe that they're not going to see it and steal it.
But if we did wildlife cameras in relationship to the vents?
Well, it's a 16-acre...
22 acres.
22 acre.
And there's
just the landfill is 22 acres.
But how many vents?
About 30, 35.
I mean, they're cheaper than regular, than full-on video cameras, but they're not cheap. And of course, we don't have any budget.
Not that they could pay for it after they set it on fire anyway, but...
It's an excellent idea, and that's really what I was hoping, is I'd have the perfect solution, but I'm not sure that we have one.
More of a presence out there maybe, or?
If we could think of a way to have a greater presence out there by, my only thought is if there was a more active use by good people. I mean, the reason we know about the broken gate is because somebody jogs out there. And, just having more...
Power out there at all, period.
The power was disconnected when we dismantled the gate trailer just recently. So there's in theory electricity, but then it's a hookup and it's another cost.
We couldn't put someone in it that owned their own motorhome and...
I thought about that when Ernie Perry was still here. He suggested that it might be a possibility to actually install some kind of a septic tank out there and have somebody in a trailer or a mobile home basically living there. It's kind of an odd thing to think about, living at the dump, but it's actually quite a beautiful piece of property. And when I was out there checking on the gates, I saw, well, I shouldn't say, I saw a deer. I don't want to have people coming in looking for it.
I would think that maybe we should do a little bit of research about what would happen if we would be able to do a host/guard type residents out there. I mean, we do that in the county parks, and we don't really pay them to be there, but they're there because they're
Right.
doing a job.
Well,
But I mean, I think that maybe we should actually see what the cost would be to have an RV pad or a place where someone could actually have a modular unit, a mobile unit, that they could stay there a specific number of days of the year in exchange for acting as a quasi-guard or
Yeah.
just a presence. Yeah, a guest custodian would be,
well, let me look into that,
okay.
and I'll see what
I
that
think
would
that
take.
would be helpful.
Commissioner Hawley just said dogs. I bet we could get a couple pit bulls.
Huge liability.
Huge.
Liability.
Liability.
If they bite somebody.
Oh, yeah, you don't want dogs, just a person.
I was asking around to see if there's
Well,
any
that can
place you
come
could
under
rent.
priorities, maybe later on, we can talk about that. Do you need any other
I don't need
direction?
any action on this, I just wanted to let you know what was
Okay.
going on.
Okay, moving on then, there's no agenda items for collection franchise, so we're gonna move
No.
on to 6.1, transfer station. We're gonna talk about some depreciation.
Yeah, I passed out, I didn't get a chance to get this in your agenda, but I passed something out today. I just want to walk it through with you and at least get a nod or some general direction to pursue this. If you look at this, the depreciation schedule that the county auditor puts together for us, the item on the top, I drew a blue arrow pointing to it for the transfer station. The purchase cost, they identified it as $3,266,990. That's the number that's being used for calculating depreciation. They divide that by 40, and that comes up with an $81,000 a year depreciation. It's the biggest single cost in our annual depreciation. It's the biggest single component of our depreciation, and we budget that money, $110,000 every year, so we've cut back on other budget lines so we could have this in our budget.
Excuse, you're gonna have to explain that to me, because depreciation is not a cash cost anywhere.
Well, if you look at
You have a devaluation of your asset, and you take that devaluation and you put it down into an expense column. There is no cost involved,
if you look at the,
unless my accounting
I
is
think
totally
that
wrong.
we discussed putting money aside, though, to actually
If you want to fund that depreciation, that's another question.
take care of.
yeah, and I'm going to suggest that we ask someone from the auditor's office to come at the next meeting when we have our June report and have that conversation, because I think they'll be able to explain it better than I can. But I know that these are the numbers that they're using to calculate the depreciation. And
That's true.
And our budget includes, it includes $110,000. It's part of our budget, part of what we have budgeted. It's in our budget.
Well, it's on your balance sheet, and it's on your profit loss, but it is in no way, shape, or form any dollars that comes out of anything that any company does. In the private sector, I would love for my depreciation, or my basis be way up there, because then I can take whatever I devalue that, if it's a 40-year or 10-year straight line or whatever it is, I can put that down in my expense column. I can make that much more money and not pay taxes on it. But as far as a non-tax paying entity, it is absolutely of zero value in any way that I look at it. And if you can explain to me that some way different, I'd like to know it.
Well, all I can explain is our budget, which you adopted, has $110,000 budgeted for depreciation.
And where does that come from?
It's part of what's balanced out with it balances out with the revenue. It's part of our balanced budget, includes $110,000.
Comes out of your assets because you devalue your asset a certain amount. If that amount is $100,000, you devalue, if you start out with $1 million, you devalue it $100,000, then you take that $100,000 and you put it down into your depreciation expense. There's no money.
That's what,
I'm
it's
confused as to
listed,
why it's on the budget today, or on the agenda today. I don't see this as an item that should be on the agenda today.
Okay.
I'm a little surprised that it is, to be honest with you.
Well, I think it's,
it's listed
no,
as
it was asked
depreciation
to be put on
expense.
by Kevin. It was
in the
asked to be
budget.
taken off also.
It's listed as depreciation expense in the budget.
Absolutely. But there's also an item, you'll find that same exact item up on your liabilities underneath your depreciation of that asset. So somewhere in that or in your asset column is the same exact amount that goes down into your expense. There is no money. It is not a cash expense.
I understand that. The only thing that I remember us discussing, though, was actually funding, putting
Different.
into a fund.
Talking about a different deal. He's talking about a cost savings. Sorry, didn't mean to point at you.
No, that's okay, Jerry. I
Kevin is
did,
talking about a cost savings. This is not a cost savings. So don't try to fool this board in thinking that it's a cost savings. It is not.
I don't think he's trying to fool anybody. I don't think he fully understands it.
that's entirely possible. And what I had asked Jerry is, can I pull this off this agenda so I could prepare better and bring it to you at the next month? But
You asked to have it put on.
then I asked to have it
I thought that
removed.
this was a remedial enough accounting that you should understand this. This is part of your job, and I'm not very happy about having it put on, explained to you at the agenda review that this was not a cost to the authority. And you said, well, they take it out of our expenses. And I said, you think they take cash out of our expenses? I think it's real lousy that it even has to come to the board. That's why I wanted it left on here, because I'm not very happy about it, that you can try to pass off that there's a $24,000 savings to the authority when there is not.
I would concur with the chair. This is ridiculous.
I would suggest that never in my wildest dreams do I want to sit on a board and try to catch someone doing something that I don't think that they understand. But I would suggest that we would ask the auditor to please come forward and explain the depreciation allowance and how the depreciation is applied for on both the receivable and expenditure side of the column. And, you know, I don't believe there's any trickery here. If there is an issue that someone has, then we should ask for clarification. But to want to point fingers and to be aggressive makes absolutely no sense to me.
So we can say, good job, Kevin.
No, I'm not saying good job, Kevin, at all. I'm saying bring it back, have the auditor come in, explain how the setup is, and explain what we should anticipate. You know, instead of getting all hot and bothered and trying to do some kind of public ridicule, my goal is that we have a system that works. And it has nothing to do, my responsibility is not to try to play gotcha with somebody. My responsibility is to try to figure it out. Period.
Well, I don't think it should be on the agenda. I think really what we're talking about is the executive director needs to go learn about depreciation, and it doesn't need to be reported back to the board.
Excuse me, but I think the executive director requested that it be removed from the agenda so he could go get that information, and it was denied. Am I correct?
You're correct, he put it on the
No,
agenda.
am I correct that that was denied?
No. Look, this is just, it's,
You know, you want to play this kind of cat and mouse gotcha stuff. It makes no sense.
works on both sides. The job description for the director includes a financial background. This is pretty simple stuff. That was my, he did ask to have it taken off. I wanted to get it over with, talk about it, get it. I thought the auditor was going to be here. I didn't know that they were going to take off and leave. They were here. And I guess I should have brought it up. Had I known that they were going to leave, I would have had them explain this to everyone.
Yes, you should have. That should have been your responsibility as the chair.
No,
Can I request we move to 7.2?
I'd like to make a motion that we defer this item 6.1 to our next meeting and request that the auditor be here to help us with this.
Being all knowing.
So that's my motion, is
May I make a request that if the board individually or as a whole
First request.
has concerns about my performance, there's an appropriate forum for that. It's called closed session performance evaluation. And if you have these strong feelings, that would be a wonderful thing to get that done because it's been on the agenda since March. And this is exactly the kind of thing that's more appropriate to talk about rather than trying to embarrass me in public, which you have a right to do, but it's not appropriate.
No, you don't.
Well, I can't stop it. That's all I can say. But
It wasn't meant to be an embarrassment on my end. You were trying to embarrass this board.
no.
That's the way I feel about it.
Well, that's not true.
Okay, well, it's not true that I'm trying to embarrass you.
I do feel that
Seems to be a
this,
personal attack.
I do feel that this would best be suited for the personnel evaluation.
Okay.
And I do know that we have, I hope that this board has finally followed through with completing the evaluation that's been on the agenda for 6 months. Because that's where we
I
need
don't-
to let him know whether he's doing his job
I don't have
correctly or
it.
not.
So I don't know.
Okay, we have no action.
No.
Rick, you have something?
Well, the only question I have is this something that as a board or as a commission, we think we need to wrestle with this in open session?
I don't think so at all. I mean, I don't, at the time, back down.
I'm going to wait. I wasn't going to say anything. I was waiting for my turn.
This was the discussion that we had at agenda review when I talked to Kevin about it in the first place. He had did not want to take it off at the time. Then he requested to have it taken off, and I thought at this point, it needs to stay on there. It needs to get out there if that's what he wants to do. I think it's an internal thing that should have just been done if he wants to do it. But to try to make it look like he's saving this authority some money, when it's actually not there, I just think it's totally wrong. That's what I'm saying.
I just think now that it's come before us in open session, it seems like we should have the auditor and Kevin have the ability in open session to clarify it at a
Sure.
later date.
I'd be
There
happy
is a
to
mo-
see it. So let's bring
And
it
that
back
was
to
my
next meeting?
motion, is
Okay.
to continue this
Just
until...
direction to bring it back to the next meeting.
Right,
Okay.
with the auditor
Now,
here.
Ms. McClure, do you want to say?
Yes, I would just like to point out that historically, there has been a discussion in relationship to this board and the depreciation schedule with the auditor's office. And there has been confusion over the years on how it's applied. So I'm not sure that there's anyone in particular to blame, but there has been a gray area of issue. And it may be simple bookkeeping to you, but it has been a difficulty with the auditor's office and with solid waste and vis-a-vis.
I apologize, I have a 5 o'clock commitment.
Okay.
Good, I'll go too, and then we won't have a quorum. Will that do it?
No, we have a quorum.
No, David's gone.
David's gone.
It only takes 3 of us.
Three supervisors.
Yeah, if I leave, David's gone.
No.
Yeah,
Oh, Leslie's
Leslie, Jerry, and myself.
feel free.
I'll wait.
Okay. We've already had the discussion. We're going to move on to 7.2. We're going to bring 6.1 back. Me too. We've already had the discussion about 7.2. Let's bring that back to probably not the next meeting, but maybe a following meeting when we can get the ordinances from the city and the county straightened out. So I don't think we need to go over that unless somebody wants.
Actually, on 7.2, is it possible that the task force could pull the county and city ordinance in comparison with solid waste and
That's what
come
they've done.
back? There are, in the possible, just a
That's what they've already done.
recommendation
They've already made the recommendation. They know what needs to be in the city ordinance and they know what needs to be
we
in
have
the
the
county.
voters on it then.
But that needs to be done before we remove anything, I think, or repeal anything, if that's what the board wants to do.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull that off unless there's some objection, I'm going to pull that off to another meeting. Richard?
Actually, I don't think there's any. If you pull the item, you can't talk
He's
on
pulled
it.
the item, you can't.
We're not going to discuss, we're not going to.
Comment.
Sorry, Rich, you could.
Okay, going on 7.3, 5-year review of the Regional Integrated Waste Management Plan and site inspection from Cal Recycle staff. Ted, Kevin, is that something for you guys, or?
Mary Wilson of the Solid Waste Task Force alluded to the meeting where 2 members of the Cal Recycle staff came and reviewed programs. They also included in there a brief meeting with the task force, but we left early with them to continue on the inspection. Thanks to Recology and Lori Poole, that review of programs included looking at Pine Grove School lunch recycling program, Julinda Recycling, Crescent Arms Apartment, of course, the Del Norte County Transfer Station. They generally were pleased with our programs and thought things were going just fine. And we did discuss the 5-year review, which is coming up. And just because there seems to be some confusion about the 5-year review, we do an annual report, which is generally included in the consent agenda for the board, describing all of the recovery programs, reuse, recycling, composting programs that the authority has implemented over the years to comply with this law. And that is the crux of the 5-year review, is the task force reviews all of those programs, sees if there's a way to make improvements, and then they make suggestions. So which years are included is actually somewhat less important. It's more a snapshot in time. How are you doing? How have the last few years gone? That would be different if we weren't already meeting our requirements. Throughout Cal Recycle and its predecessor, the California Integrated Waste Management Board, their staff has always said they would rather see us implementing programs than chasing paperwork. And so during the time when this was initially due for review, we were busy working on the new collections franchise, which implements many of the programs that complies with this law. So they were not disappointed that these things were a little bit behind the timelines. That's not unusual for other jurisdictions. But they did encourage us to work on this closely with the task force so that it can be completed quickly.
Why was there a lag time in not finishing up to 2010?
Well, we give annual reports, and there was some confusion as to when it was due, because it was last turned into them in 2006, and it took them a little while to go through their approval process, but 5 years from then would be 2011, so we thought we were on timeline, whereas they asserted as they were here that the 5-year counts every 5 years regardless of when the last one was turned in. So it goes 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010. So it goes on the 5-year increments as opposed to considering when the last one was submitted.
Right, I understand that, but who's supposed to be is that something that the task force keeps track of, that they know when they're supposed to?
Well, in the past, what has happened is the Cal Recycle staff has contacted us regarding the 5-year review, because they also go through their cycles and reorganizations as to who's responsible for doing that review. So that's what's happened.
Okay. Okay. So I guess we have no action on this?
Well, the recommended action is because the last few meetings of the Solid Waste Task Force has not included this on the agenda, and that's been because this is known by staff to be a priority item and was included on the list of items that the task force was to address. All we can do, since Chair Mary Wilson has taken over the publishing of the agenda, is suggest that it should be on. And if she doesn't put it on, she's publishing the agenda. So just trying to figure out the right way to navigate this, our recommendation is that the board actually direct the chair of the Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force, who has assumed responsibility for preparing, publishing, and posting the agendas, to include the mandated 5-year review of the county-wide integrated waste management plan on each of the agendas until this task is completed. The 5-year review is to include the requested changes to the household hazardous waste element, incorporating the authority's adopted policies supporting extended producer responsibility, and with the expectation that the Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force adopt and submit their comments to the authority board in time for the regular authority board meeting of January 2013.
And I guess that was my question on why this hadn't come before Ms. Wilson was the chair, and now there seems to be kind of an attack on her. Why hasn't she done that?
As you may recall, the task force had somewhat lapsed and had not met in several months, and so that was part of what happened, and it got reinvigorated, and then we had new members, and it was appropriate to bring those new members up to speed.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you asked her to put that on the agenda?
Yes.
And you've now put it on the agenda, Mary, is that right?
Let's see, so there are two meetings that we did not put on the agenda that we
You need to be on the microphone.
It has been on the agenda in, I believe, all but two of the meetings. We have not, again, we're a brand-new task force that was seated in March, and so in order to really do a report on this, we all need to become familiar with all the different elements. And honestly, when the board directed in regards to putting together the recommendation for the ordinance, we had a couple of special meetings that this was not on the agenda, and we were trying to push to get everybody up to speed so that we can move forward in putting our recommendations regarding the ordinances forward. So there were a couple of meetings, yes, that it was not on the agenda. Again, after our meeting with Cal Recycle staff, at the end of that meeting, we realized that that is our main function, again, as a task force, and that we agreed to meet it twice a month until we can move forward and get this completed, and that it is the, will be on every agenda until we complete this. So again, it's, the ordinance thing came up. We had some special meetings that weren't, we only meet once a month typically. So there's not been that many meetings really since I took over the agenda after, May, so June, July, August, and this is September. So anyway.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Public comment. Richard.
Mr. Hemmingson, I want to remind you of something.
Identify yourself for the recording.
Richard, guess your name.
For over a year and a half, Mr. Hemmingson, and this body.
You need to identify yourself for the record.
Okay, my name is Richard Miles. I'm a member of the task force. For a year and a half, Mr. Hemmingson, I went before the Board of Supervisors. And I kept trying to remind the Board of Supervisors that the Solid Waste Task Force was not meeting, that the old chair, Clark Moore, was not calling meetings, because I was aware personally that we were behind in this 5-year plan. Then, unfortunately, this body here gave us some directions. Within that directions, nothing was said about the 5-year plan. So you can't point fingers at Mary Wilson, because your staff should have explained that we needed to be working on the 5-year plan.
Thanks, Richard.
No, I'm not done. I still got a couple of minutes.
Oh, I thought you'd finish your...
No, I'm not, Jerry.
Well, finish up then, Richard.
Well, I'm going to
Come
finish
on, we've been here a
up.
long time.
No, if you wouldn't have belittled your staff, maybe we could have finished up and opened up this 5-year plan, because it is an important issue because of the elements in it. And it's the elements that's in it that if you want the task force to be an independent group, you need us to look at it. Starting with the education element, the composting element that Hambros recently figured they couldn't pencil to make profitable in Del Norte County. And I think that's wrong, because you punish Tommy Sparrow when he took a load down south. Then there's other elements. And you need to give this group the independence to come back with you with the suggestions we need to make to the state. So let us do it.
Any other public comment? I see we have someone from the auditor's office. You want to talk to us about depreciation?
We're going back?
Well, I think that's why you came here.
Yeah.
Sherrick Cron, Assistant Auditor Controller. You have some questions. I'm ready.
I don't have any questions. But Supervisor McClure had some issues.
No, I wasn't sure I had issues. I was that my, our report that we have from the auditor's office, and I'm not sure if this is your report or if it's one that is generated within,
Yeah, that's not one of our reports.
this is your report.
Yes.
Can you explain when you do the depreciation allowance on how we take that 81,000 a year and how we apply it, how it shows as revenue and expenditure? Is that?
Well, basically, it's an offsetting entry. It's a balance sheet entry. There's an accumulated depreciation amount that will offset the depreciation expense.
And that we've done a depreciation now over 30 years as opposed to 40, is that correct?
I'm not aware that the actual time frame has changed, that it was being depreciated. I would have to look into that to see if that's changed.
Kevin, are we at 30 years on the?
It says 40.
On the county side?
That's not the county.
Okay,
This
on
side,
on the county side,
40 years.
what's our depreciation number of years?
40 years.
40 years. And then when we turn it over and we look at what you've presented, the revised depreciation of the 40 years, can you tell me how you came to the revised depreciation as opposed to it being 56,000 and to be the 81,000?
Simply trying to address the starting number, the purchase cost, by pointing out that the loan was 3.5 million and that there were 1.2 million in non-construction expenses, and that a more appropriate number would be more like 2.2 million split over 40 years.
And so we are proposing, or this proposal, is to actually take the depreciation rate as opposed to the 3.5 to make it a 2.27. And consequently showing a difference in the devaluation on the two sides of the equation.
That's something that we would have to, I mean, we can meet with you, Kevin, and sit down and go over that. I was not aware of a change of the methodology in which we were going to depreciate. The only thing that I'm aware of since I started working here that we did as a request was to split out the transfer station separately so that you guys could see that on the financials. And I know that was done
Last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
6-7 months ago.
Don't you check that every month? Doesn't the auditor's office oversee the transfer station figures?
Oversee the what?
Figures, don't you look at that every single month?
Not the depreciation necessarily. The depreciation's done on an annual basis.
I mean, what about the rest of it? The rest of the figures and stuff, don't you check those?
Well, we don't check them necessarily. I mean, we do any inputting if there was expenses or recording of revenue, things like that, yes.
All right.
It's not something that our office really audits on a monthly
No,
basis.
I don't mean audit, I meant
Right.
you do the rest of
So
it.
what the suggestion was to actually take a look at, rather than looking at the transfer station cost of the 3.2, which is what the auditor's office has currently as the purchase cost,
Right.
to actually look at the purchase cost and then subtract out the non-construction expenses, which many times in a depreciation schedule, non-construction expenses are not included in a depreciation schedule. Is that correct?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is
That
typical.
typically is not included in a depreciation schedule.
Correct.
So now we have a depreciation schedule, and the question is, should we back those non-construction expenses out of the depreciation schedule and have a revised depreciation schedule that more readily replicates the actual depreciation cost of the building. And that was the proposal that was being brought forward. It wasn't showing that there was a $24,000 net profit or that there was a $24,000 non-net loss. It was that we should possibly be adjusting this because we are currently having a depreciation schedule that includes non-construction expenses. And non-construction expenses historically in any kind of public building, public infrastructure, are not included in a depreciation schedule. Is that correct?
That is correct, but before an adjustment would be made, I would caution that we research that from the beginning and see how it was valued.
Absolutely,
Right.
and I think that that was the request of the director, that we meet and make that discussion, because
Right.
we're trying to get clarity in making sure that we have a depreciation schedule that is adequate for the transfer station, because we know that at the end of the 40 years, we need to have a plan on how to make sure that we have the reinvestment for the next 40.
Right.
And that's what a depreciation schedule is about.
I would also, if we were going to look at that, probably want to include the auditor, the outside auditors in the discussion, just because one of the things that, and I'm not saying in this specific situation, that when it comes to depreciation in general, you can't really just pick and choose at which you want to value and readjust your depreciation in order to make it most beneficial for your financials at any given moment. You can't
Right, you
change
pick
that,
a
so.
point in time.
Right.
And you determine what that is. But if you discover in your picking and point of time that you have included the non-construction expenses as part of the depreciation schedule, then possibly you need to adjust that.
Correct, and there may have been a reason why that was included. It's not impossible that non-construction expenses sometimes are included in an overall depreciation of a single asset, especially if you're looking at the transfer station in general, you know, and isolating that from all your other buildings and improvements and things like that. There may have been a very good reason. I, for just shooting from the hip, wouldn't know until we actually look into it.
It was pretty loosey-goosey as far as how it was applied originally.
That very well could be, and that's, yeah, it's much like everything else, and there's probably been a lot more talk lately, you know, meeting with Kevin and, you know, looking at all different kinds of issues that they have and how we can work better together from the auditor's office, working with solid waste on, I mean, even simple things, you know,
Monthly report.
Right, exactly. That's one of the things I talked with Kevin the last time we met was, you know, maybe there's a different format. I mean, you know, just one of the things that's hard coming into a position like this, you know, it's like I haven't been here that long, you know, and that you get a lot of the, you know, same as last year, and maybe through this we can look at some of the things and not always do everything the same as last year.
And I think and we'll talk about some of these other things that Supervisor McClure has said that aren't exactly accurate, but if you want to reduce the basis in your depreciable asset and put some of the funds into a non-depreciable asset, that's a possibility. But, and I don't disagree that maybe that should or shouldn't happen, but for that to be a cost savings and to put that out there like it's a cost saving, I think is that question.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a cost savings because
It's not a cost savings.
It's just basically how it's expensed and how it looks on the books. It's an overall obligation, the end total, regardless of whether or not something was construction cost or non-construction cost. It's still an overall obligation by the entity as far as how it's going to look on the books. It's just, that's why I said I caution about, you know, putting too much effort into something that basically it's a presentation of financial information when it necessarily doesn't give you a cost savings, or it isn't making any money, it isn't moving revenues or expenses around, and, you know, just, but I have no problem in spending some time in, you know, and neither would anybody in the office, and looking at, you know, presenting that in the best way forward and putting, you know, the financials in the best light.
And I don't disagree with that. Any other questions?
No.
Thanks, I appreciate
Thank you.
I appreciate you staying late, and if I can address, I guess we're 7.4, which is great, because this was, the depreciation issue was something that Supervisor McClure made the motion to accept the order of these priorities, and depreciation was the third on the list of things to do. And it was also on that list a cost savings of $24,000. So to say that that wasn't put out there as a cost savings is totally false. Not trying to attack anyone, I'm just saying that that's not a correct statement. So Supervisor Sullivan asked to have this discussion
did.
and possible action to reconsider the authority work plan priorities, and I'm sure that this was probably one of the reasons why.
Well, this is one of the reasons. There are other things in the priority goal. It was my understanding that we were coming up with a list of priorities, but after the fact, I understand we put them in sequence of priority in terms of what needed to be done. And there are a lot of things on this thing that I don't think are major projects to get done. Depreciation shouldn't be on this. We can now take off reduced post-closure landfill liability, because that was just done. There are some things on the list, though, that are already being done, that are being done in one case by Hambros with the composting pilot, transfer station operations, half of that's being done. Collection franchise, I would imagine that we would be following up on the collection franchise and the transfer if there are complaints. Isn't it usually complaint driven if there's issues with the collection contract? Or not? That's a question for you, Kevin. How does the authority deal with if on the collections contract?
We have regular interaction with them. We get reports from them on what's going on. We respond to customers' complaints. We respond to requests for information on service for the franchise. It's a contract that we manage. It's ongoing, as is the operation of the transfer station. We're open every day and the service is every week.
Well, so it would still be a priority, but it would be falling further down the list because it's already in place. It's not something you need to put immediately addressed because it's been put in place already.
That's not a question.
Well,
Is that a-
yeah, no, that is a question. That is a question. If it's already been put in place, just like the
Well,
reduce post-closure
this was
limit.
in the context of reduced staffing. 2 years ago, we reduced our office staff from 5 to 4, and we've further reduced this year, and we were trying to point out several things. One is that this board has asked for a lot of new information, which does take some time. It's happened over a period of months, and so it seemed, one, useful that you recognize that I'm keeping a list, and two, that it's not possible to do everything in the time frame that you might want it, as much as we're trying. So it was an attempt to get some direction on priorities. The transfer station is ongoing. It takes a tremendous amount of time. We run a 7-day-a-week business. We staff it, we operate it. The customers get used to us being open. We are open every day. The majority of our time, which is why it's number one, is keeping that business open. Everything else follows from that. Our only source of revenue is the transfer station, and everything else is secondary to that as far as keeping the operation going. So yes, it's in operation and it is ongoing, but I don't see how it can be not a priority that we keep the doors open every day and that we keep it staffed and that...
Oh, I'm not saying that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying my issue with the priority list was the order that was put in, and the assumption was made that we were going to address things at the top of the list and go down the thing. And that's not my wish as a commissioner on this board, is that things get, once they're in place, like the collections contract, it would follow down in the order.
And my challenge is there are 10 of you, and each of you have your own different priorities. I can't follow 10 sets of priorities. And so it's up to you all, 6 of you, or a majority, or somebody, to come to some agreement to give us direction. And then we will do our best to carry out these things. But it's just a reality. We can't do everything at once. It's a daily struggle to prioritize the work that has to be done. And our number one priority continues to be operating the business that we run. It's daily, it's weekends, it's Monday through Friday. There are days we don't get past item 1 and 2. And the other things are discretionary. Some of the research projects are large. And I'm trying to be respectful to point out that we're not getting to them.
Okay. Well, I'm fine as long as it's a priority list, but not the sequence. That's what I have an issue with, because some things need to come down the sequence.
Well, for example, I'm not, because so many things have happened by a nod and a consensus direction, that some of these things are not completely clear. For example, the interest in studying privatization. I'm not exactly sure what all of you want. I know that I'm clear on what some of you want, but I'm not clear on what all of you want. And it's hard for me to sort through, especially when all 10 of you are up there, and there's no vote. It's not possible always to do what some of you want without doing something against what somebody else wants. And so having a vote to approve this was somewhat helpful. Nothing was taken off the list. And like I said, I'm trying to be respectful of individual requests as best I can, but it's most useful and most helpful to get direction from the majority of the board, because then you've all decided. I mean, even if you're in the minority, when you vote, then that's what we're going to do. So it's just simply that. We can't do everything. We can't do everything at once. It's a daily struggle to juggle these things, and I want to be respectful of your interests, as long as you can be respectful of our limitations, and even if you're not.
Richard, did you have something?
I just wanted to go along with Mr. Sullivan there. City has day-to-day things that they do too, yet the city manager does other things that we need. But you talked about the privatization. I mean, that is a high priority for me. I mean, I hear the public telling us, why do we have these boards? Do we need this board? Do we need the authority? And I'd like to put that to rest. And maybe we can find out if we look into seeing privatization, if it's good or bad, and move on from there. I'd like to see that number 1. I agree with Commissioner Sullivan. These ongoing things are ongoing. The city works 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, yet our city manager does other stuff that we request of him. We put it in priorities, and our staff does too. The staff does too. The Solid Waste Authority has lost 1 person. And I understand that. But I'm thinking privatization is going to have to be a consultant to do it. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm not even sure that you
I don't
and
know how
Mike-
much it would cost
I'm not
to
even
do
sure
it.
that you and Mike are talking about the same
Maybe
thing.
we're
Because
not.
the last time you brought it up, what you wanted to research was whether it would be better for the city to go separate from the Solid Waste Authority.
Yes.
And that's a different thing. That's a different, just between the two of you. And I'm listening. I mean, you know I'm listening
Oh,
to
I do
you.
know that,
Because
yes.
I just told you what you said when we met.
Yes.
That's a different thing.
I want both things. You're
Those are-
right.
So should we close the transfer station to do this? How could that not be a priority? I'm not saying I won't do these things. In fact, let me suggest something that will get us past this today, if you want. That item will, under your direction, Chair and Vice Chair, we'll put it on the next agenda. You guys take a vote, give me some direction, try to be clear on what you want, and we'll bump it up if that's what you want. But I'm not at all clear on, first of all, I'm not at all clear on what you want. Because even between the two of you, you're saying two different things. So I can't do what
I understand.
the both of you are saying, and you're the only ones talking. Second, you have to appreciate how difficult, perhaps even awkward, to ask that your staff make it the highest priority that we're going to come up with a plan for you to eliminate our jobs. So if we're going to have this discussion, I'd like to have it in the discussion of some level of appreciation for what this means for your staff, which we do a good job for you. And no, Jerry, I'm not a financial wizard. It's not on my job recommendation or requirement. It was never anything I promised. You know, we do the best we can with what we have.
Mr. Chair, then, if I might offer Kevin's suggestion, can we pull the priorities? Not right now, but send it out and we'll just mark from 1 down the list.
Supervisor McClure.
Excuse me, but again, I will go back to our last meeting, that priorities and goals and objectives are done during a process of an employee evaluation, where you fill out the forms, you answer the questions, you say what your priorities are, and you have a closed session evaluation of the performance. And apparently, nobody's filling out nobody's filling out the worksheet or something. There's 10 of us up here, and I got an email the other day that there had been 3 done. So, you know, I don't get it, why people want to browbeat somebody, and we've been supposed to do an evaluation since last March, and nobody has the cojones to put it down on paper and sit in a closed session and take care of business. And, you know, I'm done. I've done my job. So if you haven't done your job as far as what your performance evaluation is, then ask yourself how come you're asking for a priority list here when you haven't done a performance evaluation.
Well, you know, I'll answer that question. I'm not doing a performance evaluation. I've only been on this board a few months. And I can't evaluate someone just from a few months.
Then put that on paper and submit it.
I've said it. Why put it on paper?
Because that's part of the process. That's how it's done. You don't skip around and do crap like that for employees. Employees are to be respected.
Now, I'm the first one to say that. You're absolutely right. But if I'm not qualified to do an evaluation, people know that.
And then you submit that and say you're not.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
You're taking no action, you don't have to have any. We have no action, you don't have to take any.
Richard, you want public comment?
Yes.
Well, come on. On topic.
Yeah, there's a process. She even asked you in a politer way that I did that it's time this board grow some gonads. Last time I brought up the gonad issue, I had to leave.
Well, maybe that's what I should do now.
Okay, you people are elected by the city and the county. You formed this Joint Powers Authority to manage our transfer station. You do, as a managers, because in reality, that's what you are, is managers. For a lot of reasons, and one of the reasons is a task that we need to perform is the 5-year plan. You need...
That's a priority.
That's a priority. You need to set some priorities, and one of them is give your staff the time to come before the Solid Waste Task Force to assist us to get that done. Also, it's time, because there is a legal issue, and Martha can explain it to you. Real simple. This man has a right every year to have an evaluation. And what I'm hearing, Jerry and Richard, it's time you do that. Thank you for the time.
I filled out my form.
Can I have one more statement?
Yeah, hang on just a second. Do we have, you said you were going to get all the evaluations to Ellen at the agenda review?
You asked us to send them to Jeremy. That's what I did.
Hang tight, just hang tight. This is between Kevin and I. At the agenda review, you said Ellen could do it. You were going to go by and pick up all the
I did.
forms. Okay.
I went and I talked to Jay.
Okay.
And he could only find 2. and I knew that there were more than that. I suggested that there were more than that, and that Jeremy had them. He was going to talk to Jeremy, and I've been provided no evaluations
Okay.
in any
So
form.
we're still looking for the sheet.
Can we do a special meeting then, just to do the eval? I mean, it's due. Let's set a special meeting or next week or the week after.
Well, let's just do it. Richard said he's not going to do one. Is there anybody else who hasn't?
I have one.
Anybody else who hasn't done it that's going to do it or not going to do it? Can we expect one, not expect one?
I understand that Jay is going to do them, is going to compile them and figure out the percentages. I think in the future, he and the city manager need to get together and maybe do that as a team effort instead of it being left on Jay's hands.
I don't disagree, and he probably doesn't either.
Yeah, I don't know when I heard it, when it was said that an employee of Del Norte Solid Waste should not be doing, not compiling the evaluation.
Well, and I shouldn't have to be pulling this all together. I mean, it's the one thing
Right.
that I can't actually do for y'all.
Right.
I
So
don't have anything, I haven't been given anything. I would help if I could help, but I can't fill it out for you.
I think in the future, Jay and the city manager will get together and compile what this board puts together.
Can I make one last comment?
Yep.
I want to make one last comment, and I'm a little hot-headed right now, so I understand that I may be a little pointed and my emotional level may be a little exaggerated. Just today, we passed my 17th year of budget for the county of Del Norte. And when I first started with the county of Del Norte in doing budgets, from this dais, there were actual questions that referred to, do you really need to buy a three-door side file cabinet as a three-door depth file cabinet? Do you really need to buy a five-star chair, or could you have a non-rolling chair? I mean, the level of micromanagement into budgeting was absolutely bizarre. And the level of budgeting and the level of control over departments was absolutely out of control. And what was happening is that there were actually supervisors that were going to different departments, making a request of department heads based on how they were going to adjust their budget and how they were going to do their evaluation, rather than allowing departments to set their standard, to identify their priorities, to come up with their plan, and then to do an end-of-the-year evaluation, and then to do a regroup of that evaluation, of that performance evaluation, and continue on. And we have, I believe, as a county, we have taken giant steps in the maturation process of becoming a working community that understands how government is applied. And for us to want to sit here and to identify numbers 1 through 9, for instance, as your priorities, when you have a grouping of priorities is what departments do, and then from that grouping of priorities, you identify and evaluate how you did. And that's how you do it. You don't micromanage. You don't roll it down to, we really think that you shouldn't have had a skylight in your office. You should have had a single pane window. And I find this extremely frustrating because I value my time. I value the expertise of staff. I value the expertise of the auditor's office. and I value the expertise of understanding the volumes of law required to meet the needs of solid waste in Delmar County. Just like when we talked that we made a records request to the Water Board in relationship to challenging the fee that we were being charged by being classified as an A1 site. And we found out that it was 24 feet of information. Our staff was able to navigate that. Our staff was able to take that and reduce it almost in half and allow us to be able to establish and prove where we are and how our rating should be, which is unheard of with the Water Quality Control Board. But we just kind of blow that stuff off. And we want to like do this kind of harassing zinging, and I don't get it. And I'm extremely frustrated with that lack of professional approach.
Anybody else?
Jerry, just in answer to your earlier question about the valuations, I've not yet completed mine. I have no good excuse other than, like all of us, we're just busy, but I can commit to completing that before the next meeting.
Okay, well, we'll set it up for the next meeting, A again. And with that, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.